Hey there, so today I'm going to create a two-part tutorial to make up for the fact that I haven't made some for a while. What we're going to do first of all is we're going to create a really nasty gash on the hand. You can do this anywhere else on the body, and then in the second half I'm going to make it look like a surgeon has stapled that wound back together again. Normally surgical staples are used for wounds that are quite large. If certain parts of the skin need to be removed for whatever reason, they'll staple the skin back together again. Hopefully get something from this and enjoy. So what you'll need for the second part of this tutorial is either some nose and scar wax or some skin safe silicone, and it's completely up to you, whatever you're more comfortable using, but we'll only be using a little bit of this. You'll need some form of adhesive to be able to stick those two things down. I probably wouldn't use this for silicone, but you'll definitely need it for nose and scar wax. You'll need some fake blood with a little bit of detergent as well, and we'll only be using this very sparsely. I have this product here from Makeup Online, and this is psoriasis paste. If you don't have this, what you're actually wanting to achieve with this is just some dry, irritated skin around the wound. So the other alternative you can use for this is just latex, and then you can go back in and pick at it slightly. You'll also need to create some surgical staples, so you could just use normal stationary staples. I've just got a paper clip here that I've undone, and then I've gone in and bent and cut with some pliers. I've run these ends over a bit of sandpaper as well, just so that they don't dig into my skin or damage my skin. You'll need, again, a mixture of brushes for this tutorial because we'll be painting the wound a little bit later on. And then you'll also need your alcohol and your alcohol activated pellets as well, because we'll be going back in and creating a bit of irritation around the surgical staples. You'll also need some petroleum jelly to smooth things down, and that's it. For the second half of the makeup now, you want to take those reference photos, if you did take some, and just use them as a guide to draw the scar line back out. So what we're trying to do here is replicate the same wound shape, but imagining that the skin has now been sewn up or stapled back together again. So that's just a guide now, and then go in with a skin illustrator palette and a very, very fine brush. So I've got this one here, and we want to go back over sections of this line now and just darken them up a little bit more. And you want to try and paint this as thin as you can. I'm using this technique. I actually saw Catherine do this on her channel, and I will link that below. So she has a very similar tutorial on her channel at the moment, which is showing you how to make it look like your skin has been stitched back together again after a wound. So we're going for a very similar look here, but what I'm trying to do is make it look like the skin has been stapled. Once you're happy with the line, the next step is to go over the top of this with skin safe silicone. So what you want to do is just mix up a small amount of this. And what I do is I get a tongue depressor, just break it in half, because you don't want to cross-contaminate these two products, otherwise you'll end up setting it. So just grab a little bit on this one here, and what you want to do is throw this away so you don't get the sticks confused. And then exactly the same amount again of the other product. And then just go in and mix those two halves together. And then what you want to do is put that down now on top of that line that you've drawn before. So just follow the line. So once you put the silicone down, what I normally do is just get a little bit of petroleum jelly on my fingers, and then just go in and work over the edge and make sure that that silicone sits smooth against the skin. Then you can go back in, spray a little bit of alcohol over the top just to stop this sponge from sticking. So I go in now just with the stipple sponge and just lightly go over the top of that silicone, because I don't want shiny fingerprints or finger marks on top of it. I want there to be a little bit of texture in there as well. Now what you can do is go in with the sculpting tool and coat the tool just so that silicone doesn't stick to it, and go in and actually recreate the cut line. So you want to follow that red line in the middle there. And what I do is just drag a little bit through and then take a break and then do the same thing again. So what we're trying to do is make it look like in the parts where the stitches will be or the staples will be, make it look like the skin has been pulled together, and then these open bits here are the sections between the staples. Now, in these areas where we want the staples to lay across the wound, what I'm going to do is get the flat round end of my sculpting tool now and just press into that silicone. So I'm just going to go back in with the alcohol now, spray over that one more time, and then just dab with my sponge here just to kind of soften those edges up a little bit more. While that silicone is still wet, what I want to do is go in now and lay the staples in over the top. So I've just got a pair of tweezers here, and what I want to do is pick them up and stick them down into that silicone while the silicone is still wet. Make sure they're obviously facing the right way when you stick them down. And I'm just going to go in over the top of that silicone and just tap it on lightly. Make sure not to disturb the staples as well, but we just want to get rid of the shine on top of that silicone. If you've noticed that some of the staples have come up, what you can do is just grab a little bit of Prozaid on the end of a Q-tip and just stick those down. And this is optional. I mean, you could do this at the start if you want to as well. And then the last step is just to go in and add a little bit of irritation around the outside of these stitches. I'm just taking the Skin Illustrator Flesh Tones palette now. I'll start with a bit of the rose adjuster. So I'm just lightly dabbing over the top now. Now, an alternative to adding color to something like this too is you don't necessarily always need to use fine brushes. You can use something called a chip brush. You can get these in hardware stores. What you normally do is you cut off the bristles at the end just so that the remaining ones are quite firm. And you can load up this brush now with whatever color you want and use your finger to flick paint over the top of the wound. So I'm just going to go in and spatter over the top. So I'm reasonably happy with that now. What I am going to do though is just go back in with a clean brush now and remove that spattered alcohol paint off the staples just to clean them up a little bit more, because we want those to take pride of place in the makeup, in other words, look quite shiny. So the final step now is just to go back in and add some detail around the outside of the staples and on the inside of the wound as well. So I've got a super fine brush here and I'm just going to go around and add a little bit of irritation around the outside of these staples. Not too much, we don't want to be too obvious. And you can literally start with just a dot at the end of the staple here, and then do that on the opposite side as well. And then pour just some plain alcohol out, clean the brush off again and remove the excess alcohol. And what you want to do is just go in where you put that dot and just feather that out slightly. And then you want to repeat that feathering around the outside of all the other staples. This just gives the illusion that the staples have actually been stapled into the skin. And if you want to exaggerate the skin coming together even more, what you can do is pick a shade from the Skin Illustrator palette that is actually lighter than your skin tone. And you can go in and just add a little bit of a highlight around the outer edge of these staples. So we'll start just lightly. And you don't have to, again, you don't have to do this with every single staple as well, but we just want to give the illusion that those have actually been stapled into the skin. And then the final step now is to go in and add some blood detail into these stitches. And what I do is try and get that colour underneath the staples too. That just adds to the realism. I'm actually going for a bit of an aged look to these stitches. So what I might do is just add a little bit of the aged blood colour into some of the sections as well. And then just to intensify the depth in some of the areas, I'll add a little bit of black as well. Because if you can remember, the first wound we created was actually quite deep, so we want to give that illusion with this. And again, I'm only doing black in certain sections as well. We don't want to do it all the way along the line. Now, I'm going to add just a tiny bit of this psoriasis paste. And the idea behind this is to just add it sort of sparsely, but you want to create a little bit of kind of irritation of dry skin around the wound. The final step now is to add a little bit of blood, and then we're done. And again, with the blood, we want to be very, very sparse with this too. So I'm using the same fine brush as I was previously, and I'm just going to load up those areas where I painted the black in. To make it look like the skin has been brought back together again with the staples, and in the process of that, it has compressed the skin, and blood is actually coming out from between the wound. If you wanted to, you could use this technique to create a kind of Frankenstein look on someone as well. If you wanted to wear it out to a party or something like that, I would probably recommend sticking the stitches or the staples down somehow, either with a bit of spirit gum or Pros-Aide or something similar, but some kind of durable makeup adhesive. That's the final look there. So I've added a little bit more irritation around the outside of the staples. I've gone in and scratched back into that psoriasis paste just slightly. There's some slight pale areas in there, just where the skin looks a little bit drier. And then I've gone and added some blood in over the top of that as well. I'll zoom in so you can have a look. That's what it looks like up close. This looks more effective on larger areas too. It's just easier for me to show you on my hand as well. So because this is obviously made of silicone too, it's flexible. So unlike scar wax, I can kind of move my hand pretty well, and those staples stay in place. So this is the last part of my two-part wound series, showing you how to create the damage or the initial wound, and then showing you how to make it look like that same injury has been stitched up. Thanks for watching.